Thank you very much. Welcome here to what I think is certainly the classiest place in Tewksbury, and it's one of the nicest places around. I'm glad you're here to enjoy. Mark Ginsberg and his staff always do a wonderful job. My name is Doug Sears. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Board of Selectmen in this town. For Chairman David Gay, who also is head of our Economic Development Committee, who would love to have a lot of the spots on Route 38 that don't have businesses in them, have businesses in them. And on behalf of Clerk Scott Wilson, Anne Marie Stronach, and Todd Johnson, all of the Board of Selectmen here, welcome you along with Richard Montori, who is our town manager, who cannot be here today. So greetings all, enjoy a wonderful breakfast, enjoy the speaker, enjoy the morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doug. My name is Richard Howell. I'll be your moderator this morning. One of the great issues in America today is the size and scale of government. Some think that it's too big, it should be much smaller, that it does too much. Others think that it doesn't do enough and it should be more active. And that's an ideological chasm we'll probably never bridge. But one thing I think everyone agrees on is that whatever government does undertake to do should be done in an efficient, economical way that's transparent and accountable to the voters and the taxpayers. And I know that our keynote speaker this morning, Suzanne Bump, believes that too, because when she took office as State Auditor a short time ago, she set out to transform the office. While the State Auditor's Office still does its core function of examining the accounting systems used in state government, the Auditor Bump has brought a different mindset to the office. One that seeks to break down the artificial boundaries that exist between state agencies, to get them to cooperate more together, to work more efficiently, and to be more accountable to the taxpayers. And in a time of fiscal constraints, that's more important than ever. And Auditor Bump is well equipped for the office, having spent a varied and rich career in the private sector, nonprofits, and in the public sector. She represented Braintree for 8 years in the House of Representatives. In Governor Valley Patriot's cabinet, she served as Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development. She was elected State Auditor in the fall of 2010. She's a graduate of Boston College and Suffolk University Law School. And I ask you to join me in welcoming Massachusetts State Auditor Suzanne Bump.
Thank you. I'm really delighted to be here. I have to admit it that I think that this is my first time in Tewksbury. That's an oversight that I can assure you I will be correcting. Again, in advance of the re-election campaign that I intend to mount in 2014. I'm glad to be here with all of my colleagues in government and to see a former colleague who'd like to return to government, Barbara Italian. It's great to see you here. I enjoyed a few moments with Danielle yesterday morning when we were guests, or I was her guest, with Teddy Panos on the morning show on CAP. And I gave her a little bit of a glimpse of what I was going to talk about, and gave you some further insight into it. So let me dig right in here. What I want to do is share a little bit about what motivates me in this office, which I've now held for a little more than a year, and then talk just a bit about how work demonstrates how I'm putting my goals for the office into action, and then I understand we're going to have a little bit of a Q&A, so that's great. Lots of people are quoting Barney Frank right now because he's retiring and because he's said a lot of witty and acerbic things over the years. But I want to share a different kind of quote from him. What I want to share is that he has said, government is the name we give to the things we choose to do together. And it's a definition that really resonates with me. Laws that are passed, policies that are implemented, fees and taxes that are collected, they're supposed to benefit the public good. And they occur only with the consent of the governed. And this view of government informs my view of the Office of the State Auditor, and I think imbues the auditor's role with a unique responsibility of stewardship. As Dick told you, I was a state legislator. I was also a secretary in Governor Patrick's cabinet, and what I liked most about my service in government was the opportunity it gave me to fix systems that had gone off track. Years ago in the legislature, particularly the workers' compensation system, the unemployment insurance system, but also more recently labor dispute resolution, workforce training, partnering with other entities in government, working, as Dick said, across silos. Community colleges were in fact one of my chief partners in the work that I did in workforce development. And the whole idea was to try to create those relationships in order to improve the value of the services that they were providing to the people of the Commonwealth. So we consolidated agencies to get better results and to save money. We introduced new data so that agencies could better plan and manage and measure performance. And it just all came down to one thing. It was finding root causes of delays and inefficiencies and then working to make government better. The role of the state auditor historically has been to follow the money that's being spent by state agencies and by contractors and to ask three questions. What did you spend? How did you spend it? And what did we get for it? But in the 21st century, the State Auditor's Office should be asking another question, and that is, how can we do it better? Because now we have more analytical and more technological tools than we ever have before to ask and answer that question. And that question is the first one that I asked as soon as I was elected to the position. Even before I took the oath of office, I worked with my predecessor, Joe DiNucci, to have a peer review undertaken of the office. A peer review ordinarily gets done every 3 years. There hadn't been one done of the State Auditor's Office in 15 years. So we had a group of auditors under the auspices of the State Association of Auditors come in and they examined policies and procedures. They evaluated actual audits that had been done. They reviewed staff performance, and you may recall reading that a year ago, they issued their report. We had an adverse report, and I came out and advanced an agenda for how we were going to turn that around, how it was that we were going to achieve excellence in auditing. And those actions helped me to establish a new tone at the top for the agency. Those of you in business, particularly those of you who are in financial areas, have probably long talked about tone at the top. The tone that gets set to establish that it's going to be values that are going to dictate actions. Well, it's important, particularly for auditors' offices, because we are held to high ethical standards. The standards upon which I'll be judged when the peer review team comes back in just another couple of years. So we initiated a number of actions around skills training, around team building, a lot of technology upgrades. We also instituted a new performance evaluation system, and that, along with a new tone at the top, I'm confident it's going to ensure that we won't be getting another adverse report when our peers come back to judge us in a couple of years. And the point of it all is to enable us to focus more effectively on the areas of government spending where there is the greatest potential risk to taxpayers and to those who rely on government services of things going awry. So, for example, one area where we spend a lot of time, where we actually have a standing audit unit as opposed to other agencies which we approach on a 3-year rotation, is in the Mass Health Program, in Medicaid. And we go through literally millions of transactions in the Mass Health Program in order to find providers whose billings are outside the norm. They seem to be in excess of what you would expect given their client mix, given the patient health profiles, and the like. And we find overbilling, we find billing for services that have never been performed. We work with Mass Health to get money recovered. Occasionally, we refer cases to the Attorney General's Office for prosecution. You know, and that's protecting the taxpayers, that's finding and fixing bad stuff. But you know, it's even worse, though, than that bad stuff is in the course of our work recently when we were looking at dental providers. And we zeroed in on dental providers who were serving kids. We found dentists who were driving up their billings by subjecting little kids to unnecessary and excessive fluoride treatments and x-rays, greatly in excess of the norms that have been established not only by Medicaid, but also by the American Academy of Pediatrics. And so that's not just bad stuff, that's horrifying. And it emphasizes the human element that is behind the work that we do in the office. So it's not just about numbers. In Medicaid, it's also about protecting public health. But Medicaid, that example of Medicaid work, that just represents what the office really has normally done. But I want to share with you just 2 examples of some of the ways that my vision for the office has manifested itself. So last year, I initiated a review and analysis of business tax credits. Not because I have anything against any particular one of them. I know that some of them have become controversial of late, and I'm not taking issue with any particular one, but obviously tax policy has an impact on not only revenue and spending by the state, but also on our economic growth goals. And what we looked at by taking a first look at business tax credits, tax exemptions, tax incentives, is that for about $2 billion in revenue that is foregone annually, $1 billion has no measure of success. We can only determine how effective about $1 billion worth of that $2 billion in revenue that we forego is doing, what kind of benefit it's actually bringing to the Commonwealth, because there aren't reporting mechanisms. There's nobody looking over the shoulder of the business to make sure that if they don't meet their goals, then the state has an ability to cease that benefit to them and to even potentially claw back the benefits that they receive. So I think that we have a need to know in order to have equitable and effective tax policy. And so we released our initial review of these. That helped prompt or helped move along some conversation that had already been taking place in the legislature and caused them to create a commission to look at tax expenditures across the whole of state government, and not just on the business side, but on the personal income tax side. We released our report recently, and what we have done in the first instance is to make available to the public and to policymakers a whole new level of rich detail about the purposes of all of the tax breaks, personal as well as business, that we have in the Commonwealth. They add up to as much money as we actually take in. If you look at what a tax expenditure is, things that we forego collecting revenue on, it's $24 billion. So we want to make sure that everyone understands how our tax policy is constructed, that it's transparent, and that we have accountability mechanisms. And so we also produced, in addition to this kind of information that everybody is going to be able to get just by going online, we also created recommendations for a framework for the legislature to periodically analyze the tax breaks that we have on the books, to make sure that that tax rate is the most effective way of achieving the intended goal, whether that goal is to encourage green technologies, if it's to encourage the preservation of a mature industry, or it's to foster the growth of a new industry. We want to make sure that whatever device we decide upon is the most effective one. And so there's a set of recommendations for how to analyze current ones, and also a framework for making decisions about any that would get proposed within the legislature and going forward. So tax expenditure work is one new way of looking at the analytic powers of the auditor's office to help inform government debate in order that we get government that is more efficient, more effective, more accountable, and more transparent. It's got to be a sign that I am getting more boring with age, because I actually find that incredibly exciting. The other new way that we're using the office is based upon our traditional audit work, but you folks actually got to have a greater insight into it than other folks in the Commonwealth, because it comes from the audits that we did of education collaboratives. Does Merrimack Education Collaborative ring any bells here? So it was actually with our partners at the Department of Education that we started an audit of Merrimack Education Collaborative. But that wasn't the only audit of an education collaborative that we were conducting last year. There were two others that we were auditing, and I had looked back and I saw that we had conducted audits of 3 others in the past. And I said, let's do something different. Rather than just do an audit and give it to the board of directors and send a copy off to the Department of Education, let's hold this back, hold them all back, and look at what these audits say collectively about how well this system of education collaboratives is functioning. And what we found is that there wasn't just one road collaborative. It wasn't just Merrimack where there was misspending of money, where there was possible pension abuse, where there was use of the collaborative as a slush fund, so that school superintendents who sat on the board of that collaborative would be able to spend money on things that their school committees would never have allowed. Merrimack was an egregious example of abuse of that sort, but similar things were happening across the Commonwealth at other of the 30 collaboratives that we had. And so we sat back and took a look at the big picture, and when we released our audits, we detailed to the legislature these common findings and a set of recommendations for how the legislature could improve governance and accountability of the special ed system. And this is a system that's supposed to meet the needs of special needs students, the educational needs of special needs students in all of these districts across the Commonwealth. And we saw that neither the taxpayers nor the kids were being well served. And so now those recommendations were quickly enacted into law. The governor has signed them into law. The Department of Ed can impose greater standards on the programmatic and financial activities of these special ed collaboratives, and school committees also can have much greater financial accountability from the collaboratives as to how the dollars that they contribute to their operation are being used. So that is a great step forward, using a typical audit process, but just stepping back and looking at the big picture rather than just getting stuck in the detail of the audit. So just a couple of examples of how I want to use the office to make government work better. So as I bring my remarks to a close, I just want to share with you the theme that you're going to see more and more across our audits. And that is that, and this is particularly evident if you've read some of the work that we've done recently auditing nonprofit organizations. And what you're seeing is that there's been an erosion over time of state agency oversight mechanisms and personnel in state agencies, so that we can't ensure, as well as we would like, that public money is being well spent by the people with whom the Commonwealth does business, from whom the Commonwealth purchases so much of its services. In multiple rounds of budget cutting over the past couple of decades, and in the move to privatization, the money has been preserved, understandably, in the name of and dedicated to services. But it has eroded the staff to oversee the provision of those services, the accountability on the part of the contractors who are providing those services. But to my way of thinking, oversight capabilities are not optional in government, even if they may have been regarded as something extra in our effort to save money for services. It's not bureaucratic fact to be trimmed. In fact, cutting back on oversight functions actually squanders the money that we need to put into services. It doesn't save money. So it comes down to me, to a simple proposition, that if the state cannot pay for program oversight, then it can't pay for the program. I know that I have colleagues in government who've been terrific partners with me already in the Office of the State Auditor, giving me additional tools, helping me rework my statutory mandate to more accurately reflect the changing times, and I'm finding great responsiveness to this thinking as well, and I'm looking forward to a continued partnership with both the legislature and the administration so that we can ensure that public dollars are being well spent, so that we can maintain the consent of the governed for the laws that we pass, the fees and taxes that we collect, and the policies and programs that we implement. I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you here today, and I'll be happy to take any questions that you'd like to pose to me or any suggestions that you'd like to offer as to your particular pet peeve in state government. Where do you think we've got an enormous inefficiency that the auditor might be able to help correct? Thank you.
Given that the city of Lawrence has now been taken to the school system, has been taken over by the state, seems like they're spending an awful lot more money than was being spent before they took over. Is there any oversight by your office over the receiver, the Department of Education, over the additional millions and millions of dollars they're spending in Lawrence?
Well, did everybody hear the question? It was about oversight, my oversight of spending on the school system in Lawrence now that it's been taken over. The State Auditor's Office doesn't play an ongoing role in oversight. The role of the State Auditor's Office is to be backward looking. And so, although we aren't currently auditing the expenditure of that money, that we can have a role in, after the fact, determining how well that money was spent in a given chunk of time. And frankly, that may well be already on our audit plan for another year or so out. And when we do that, we'll be looking to make sure that it was being spent according to the standards that were set for that, that there were systems in place to guard against its abuse and its waste, and we may learn from that better how to ensure that when state resources do get invested in a community that way, that there is accountability and transparency, and we get what the taxpayers are expecting. Other questions or thoughts? Sir?
Real quick, the collaborative we have with Mass right now, which happened a couple of years back, is there any way to share the information, I don't know how much is proprietary, on what happened, how they were able to steal that kind of money from that organization? With the wide variety of nonprofits and businesses in the area, it's a good, I think it would be a good idea to learn how these people did it, so maybe we can look at that on our way and it's not happening under our watch.
Right. There is, first of all, basic answer to the question is our audit files are considered confidential, and so all we can make available is the audit report itself. That said, there are ongoing investigations into that. There are forensic auditors who are going in there. The Attorney General's office is engaged, and so is the Department of Education. And one of the things they're trying to do is to untangle the relationship between the special ed collaborative and that nonprofit that it created, because that's where the transfers of money occur. And so that's one of the areas where the Attorney General is looking right now. There was, what we saw when we were looking at that is that money was transferred, and I think that the figure that we came up with was some $5 million was transferred out of that collaborative into the nonprofit organization with nothing to justify those transfers of money. This was above and beyond the actual services that were being provided, arguably, legitimately, by that nonprofit. And I know that the state is trying to figure out if some of that money is recoverable as well, because there was a surplus sitting in that nonprofit. But that raises that phenomenon of the collaboratives creating this nonprofit entity that partnered with them, and from whom, for instance, they rented facilities and got transportation services for the kids. That relationship is a related party transaction, and those are actually common in the business world, and that includes in the nonprofit world, and that is a source of a lot of problems. You're allowed to have, if you're a state contractor, a relationship with a related non-party, but you have to have rules, and you have to use proper, for instance, bidding procedures in order to ensure that it's an arm's length transaction, and you don't have just some sort of cozy relationship going there, that you have different board of directors, and you have controls to make sure that it's not just a means for you to abuse funding. And though that was operating in violation of all of those rules that existed in state government to keep those at arm's length. I mean, one of the things that was astonishing to me, and frankly, I wish I wasn't seeing evidence of this in so many nonprofit organizations, is that in that case, the board of directors of the Education Collaborative gave up their most fundamental responsibility. They actually voted to take themselves out of the budget making process. They voted to assign all of their responsibility for setting the budget to the executive director. I mean, that is a basically just giving away of your chief fiduciary responsibility. Now, I can't say whether that was done out of profound ignorance or if it was active malfeasance on the part of those folks. But too often, I'm seeing in nonprofits, the executive director is like a god to the board of directors. They go on with good intentions. They really members get recruited to the board because they really care about the mission of the organization, or they're great fundraisers, or maybe they have a lot of programmatic insights and can help the agency develop in that way. But then they're comfortable with the executive director. They're not willing to kind of ask questions that make everybody else uncomfortable, and they really lose sight of what their chief role is, which is to maintain a public trust, because you get a tax-exempt status because you are supposed to have a particular relationship, and that whole concept of stewardship comes to play. You are stewards of public monies in the same way that the government is, and a lot of board members lose sight of that essential role that they're supposed to play. So I think that is something that I'm actually working with some organizations that represent groups of human services providers to work with, starting a dialogue saying, how can the auditor's office help your executive directors and your board members stay on task and make sure that the money is being used properly. I'm sorry, that was an awfully long answer. I was getting tired of it myself. Any other thoughts, sir?
Quick question. You were talking about the tax credits
Yes.
earlier, and Lowell has done really well with film tax credits and attracting movies. A lot of the communities use affordable housing credits to meet 40B and other requirements. We certainly see constituents who like historic tax credits, and we know that all the cities and towns, many of them use economic development credits. I work in mass development, so I think about that in particular. Which of these areas or others are the ones that cause the hardest to track to show that you mentioned the dollars, the hardest to keep track of? Which of those is best, which is the worst, how you can do it?
Well, just in general, the ones that were, the tax programs, which includes film, which includes life sciences and clean energy. So the ones of most recent origin were the ones that had the best features on reporting and on accountability, on an agency's actually setting actual standards for the use of the credit. The legislature, obviously, it's because the legislature has caught on to the fact that they need accountability in that. So the more recently created ones were the ones that had the most attractive and appropriate features. So others that went on the books longer ago were the ones that are probably, that we regard as the most lacking in those desirable attributes. So, great. Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. As you can see, I love to talk about the work of the office, and I love to get the interaction to talk to you and get some ideas and direction from you. So thank you so much, Danielle. It was great. Thank you for the invitation. I hope to do it again soon.
We're now at the point of our program where we'll hear